Hey, lemlisters! I'm super pumped today to be joined with Scott. First of all, he has an amazing T-shirt. We've got the same one, so that's pretty cool. For those of you who don't know, Scott Leese is a true startup and sales expert. Among the startup, he worked at Outbound Engine, where he managed to grow revenue by 650%, and Qualia, helping them go from zero paying customers and no revenue to capturing 15% market share in 3 years, which is huge. Scott, thanks a lot for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we're super excited. For those of you who don't know, like Scott, so as I mentioned, is also founder of Scott Leese Consulting, also Surf and Sales, and something called the Surf and Sales podcast. So I definitely encourage you to go watch it and check it out. He wrote the #1 best-selling book on Amazon about sales called Addicted to the Process. And he also had thursdaynightsales.com, which is also like a great great website to go check in. And essentially like he's going to be sharing with us all amazing tips on his journey, on how we can all essentially like copy him and be as successful. And maybe one day I'll grow the same beard, but I kind of doubt it. So everyone, if you have questions, feel free to ask everything in the comment. Vuk from my team will pass it on to me, and I can ask it to Scott as well. So if something's not clear or whatever, just let me know. So first question for you, Scott, because I've been talking too much for the intro. Essentially, we as founder often deal with limited resource. So for you, what are the most important things to understand when you have to grow, but with less?
Well, I think you have to hire people around you who are capable of wearing a bunch of different hats and doing more, and people who have a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit. So they're not waiting to be told what to do. They see a need and fill a need is how I would explain it. So if I'm building the sales organization out, I'm working on, our messaging, right? What is the sales pitch going to look like when we talk to people? What is the words going to look like, on email and that kind of thing? But I need to wear a recruiting hat as well. So I have to be the chief recruiter. I also have to be the chief sales trainer. I also have to be, versed in sales operations to make sure that we're using the right tools and everybody on the team knows how to use them. So I'm doing all these different things, and you just want to avoid bringing people in who are only going to do this one little thing.
Yeah.
And it's very, very important at the beginning that you bring on people who, want to do a bunch of different tasks and are capable. And if they don't know something, they're willing to go learn it. That's one of the best things that you can do when you're just getting started.
And during the interview process, because I'm sure you've run thousands of interviews. Yeah. So how do you test these things? Like, how do you test that someone's curious? Because a lot of people can sell themselves pretty well during interviews, but actually once you hire them, you're like, oh, fuck, they're not doing anything.
But one of the things that I like to do is learn about somebody's hobbies and interests outside of work. So if I was interviewing you, I might say, tell me a little bit about yourself. Like, what do you do in your free time? What do you do in your downtime? And if somebody tells me, well, I like to sit at home and play video games. Well, that tells me something about them. But if I interview somebody else and they're like, well, I run this community on the side and I'm active in this, part of the business community, and I've run this podcast and I'm reading these. Now I'm thinking, okay, this person is a self-starter. Yeah. This person is intrinsically motivated. They like to learn new things. They're out there doing it without being told to, right? So it's that stuff that you're trying to drill down and find and kind of get past like the easy answer in an interview, right? Like you said, it's easy for somebody to say, oh, I'd love to do lots of different things. Well, yeah. It's another thing in practice. Like, are they already doing it? That's what I want to know. Are they already doing lots of different things on their own? And that's somebody that I would try to hire.
Okay, so you're looking for examples and very concrete actions from the person you're trying to hire, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. And essentially, how should someone, prioritize in the resources they spend, and what are, according to you, like the biggest mistakes you've seen like founders make when it comes to like wasteful spending and inefficiency in that that type of process?
Well, I think so many companies fail because they don't develop a sound sales strategy and sales approach. You know, they might have their way of getting clients, and then they hire a bunch of salespeople and don't train them or teach them any particular process. So I've gone into sales orgs before of, 5, 10, 25 salespeople, and every single one of them is pitching the product completely different.
Okay.
And focusing on different pain points and different features. And, one person uses email, somebody else uses LinkedIn, somebody else is calling. And it's like, wait, hold on, what works here? Do we know what works? And if we know what works, why is everybody not following the same process? So that is like the number one mistake that I see all the time without fail, is everybody's kind of doing their own thing. There's no uniformity, and you can't scale a business that way. You just can't.
So your advice would be essentially like from the ground up, have like different approaches, and
right away, like build your sales process and your sales playbook as if you're building it to scale to 100 to 200 reps. Like you've got to have new hires come in and be able to learn something and say, okay, I can go execute this. You can't have new recruits come in and then say to them, okay, now go figure it out. Like that's a recipe for disaster, right? And so, a lot of founders don't know that. They don't spend the time to bring in either an advisor or a head of sales who, has been there and done that before and knows how to build this kind of structured sales playbook and get the team on the same page. And that causes chaos. It causes a lot of startups to fail. It causes a lot of them to kind of plateau. I see this all the time. Like people are winging it and doing whatever they want, and they're able to get to, 250, 500K of ARR, but then it stops.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's because new people coming in can't figure out what's going on. And we have learned nothing from the deals we've closed and the deals we've lost because we can't A/B test anything. We have no idea what's worked and what hasn't. And then you've got to, start all over from scratch.
From scratch.
I always, when I begin, I approach it as if I'm planning to have hundreds of salespeople from the start. I got to build something that is scalable and easy to replicate for all the new cohorts of recruits that we bring in.
Okay, and basically like for salespeople, because I've seen companies do like different things. Some of them have very few resources, and it's more like, okay, you jump in, we explain quickly, you're gonna meet with another salesperson, she's gonna onboard you, and then like you're gonna get to learn, doing like shadowing. So like you stay with the person, you watch them doing sales calls, and eventually you start doing your own sales calls, etc. Like, what is, according to you, like the best onboarding possible for new salespeople joining?
Well, I think you've got to give people the opportunity to practice different types of learning. So not everybody learns by sitting and watching, right? So in your example, you said, this sales rep's going to shadow somebody else. Well, what if I don't learn that way? What if I'm somebody who likes to, physically take pieces of paper and like read and research and memorize? Like I want to research and understand the industry. Okay. I want to know and understand the product like perfectly. I want to, memorize the sales pitch, and I want to rehearse and role play with you. And I want to do mock calls. I don't want to just sit there and listen. Yeah. And that might work for some people, but not for everybody. So the best way to onboard people to me is you give them the opportunity to learn in a lot of different ways. So there'll be like some research and some classroom style training. Then there'll be some auditory learning opportunities. Then there'll be some kinetics. So you're actually, doing the job and role playing and talking and whatnot. Then there'll be some written. So I'll like create a test, like a written test, and be like, What do these terms mean in the industry, right? Can our product do this? Which of these features matters most to our customers? And they have to like take a test. So all these different modalities, right? And I'm kind of trying to integrate them. So it gives each different type of learner the opportunity to find a style, if you will, that best suits them. And you don't want to rush people through it. And you've got to have these materials kind of built out, right? And so many companies don't. And they just kind of wing this stuff or try to do it on the fly. And that's not the right way to do it. Your job as a founder or an early head of sales is to take everything that you have in your brain and get it onto paper, right? So like, what does a cold call look like? What does the email copy look like and the cadences that we send? What are all the common objections and rebuttals? What does the competitive landscape look like? How do we demo the product? Right? What's our sales cycle like? What does our pricing look like? What are our contract terms? All of these things should be written down somewhere and given people the opportunity to learn them and digest them and rehearse them and practice them. And so when they do go live, they're ready.
And when they go live for the first time, would you just leave them alone? Or would you like first record the call or like the live demo, or have someone like that's a bit more senior, like joining them?
Well, I think that you should probably always be trying to record people's calls, because at this point, that's one of the best ways to provide coaching and feedback. And it's a really good way for that rep to learn on their own and do some self-assessment, as well. So if you have the ability, I'd certainly say record some calls. There's some people who would love to have a manager or a peer on every one of their calls at the beginning. There's other people that's terrifying to.
Yeah, exactly.
And they'd rather be left alone a little bit. So I think the right thing to do is have conversations with each individual and try to provide them the support that feels right for them. Right. So if I said, hey, leave me alone for an hour or two, like, let me try to figure this out on my own, then I'd leave that person alone. If you said, I'd love to have somebody on some of my calls right from the beginning, then I'd try to figure out how to give you that support. It's this individualized type onboarding experience, I think is really key.
Nice. It makes me think, like, because early on you mentioned like the company where you went out and basically like they were all demoing the product in a different way, talking about the features, etc. And I see a lot of companies actually trying to, like pitch hard their product and not really like pitching the value, not really pitching, like they kind of fall in love with either one unique features or a set of features. How do you manage like to get your sales team not to fall in that trap and really, like talk about the value and the benefit rather than the features itself?
Yeah. So there's two things there. One is about really like the sales methodology and the process. And the other is about kind of falling in love with your own your own product. Okay. So let me start with the latter. So one of the things that I've learned over almost 20 years of experience now in the sales and startup world is that every founder thinks their product is the greatest thing on earth.
Very true.
Every single one. And it's so robust and it can do so many different things, right? But people don't care about all that stuff. They only care about a couple things, right? If you've ever gone and onto a car lot, right, and shopped for a car, okay? Not everybody is a car enthusiast. So I'm one of those people that doesn't really care. Like, I care about how much does it cost? What's the gas mileage? Is it safe? And, like, do you have the color I want? And that's it. So if the salesperson comes up to me and starts talking to me about the size of the engine and the braking speed and the amount of space everywhere and steering, handling, and all this, like, dude, I don't give a shit.
You don't care.
So I just want to run away, right? And so when you're pitching, if you just start rambling on about all the wonderful things about your product, you're running the risk that these people don't care about all that stuff, right? And every single founder I've ever worked with, I've had to tell them, wow, that's great. You have 100 things that you really want to talk about. We need to cut that list to 4, right? And it's a painful process. If I'm to say to you, talk to me about lemlist, right? You're going to tell me, well, we can do all these different things. And I'm going to say, I don't care about all that. Give me the 3 or 4 things that matter the most to your customers. And that brings me to the methodology, you know, and I wrote about this in my book, Addicted to the Process. Like my modality of selling is called the addiction model, and it mirrors the recovery process. You have to get somebody to admit they have a problem. You have to get them to understand that solving this problem is important. You have to make them agree that there's urgency to solving this problem. And then and only then does somebody care about the solution. And if you go about that out of order, the sales process is all out of whack, right? So I need to ask questions at the beginning to get you to admit that you have some particular type of problem, right? Well, once you've admitted you have a problem, that's not enough. I can't suddenly start talking about my product, because there's a lot of people that we know who have, you know, addiction and substance abuse issues, who know they have a problem but do nothing about it, because they don't think it's affecting them yet, right? Or they don't think it's important to fix. So I've got you to admit you have this problem. Now I need to spend time educating you on why you should care about fixing this. Once you have that education piece there and you're like, okay, I have a problem and this is probably worth solving. What's left? Well, the urgency is left. Yeah. Why is this a severed limb instead of a paper cut? Why is this something that I have to deal with now instead of next year? So I've got to help you realize the urgency behind the problem. Once I've got you to admit those things to me, now I can talk to you about my product. Okay. Now I can say, hey, all these challenges that you have, this need you have to fix this really quickly, this is everything we do here, you know, at Lemlist. Let me talk to you about it. And then I keep it short and sweet.
Okay. And essentially, like, I think like the process is amazing. Would you have like questions mapped out prior to the sales call for like, so for example, like a sales script where they can ask, let's say, like 5 or 6 questions in order to like spot the pain? And also second question, how do you manage to get the people to admit the urgency of the problem, or at least like make them feel that there's an urgency?
Well, number one, I 100% believe in kind of writing out and scripting or mapping out, you know, these questions. You know, when I go into companies and build them and advise them, I basically pretend in my head what a perfect sales conversation would sound like, beginning all the way to end. And then I type it up. Okay. And I keep it in front of me right here on my screen. So I'm never lost during the course of the sales call. So I have, yes, 100%. I have these questions kind of, you know, ready. Nice. Depending on what my product is and what pain points we solve. You know, I obviously tailor it there. And if I know more about a particular customer than the next, then I get even more personalized with how I ask these questions. And so, you know, I might reach out to you and say, hey, you know, you're running Lemlist. You guys are growing pretty fast over there. I noticed some of your sales reps are, you know, not too active on LinkedIn. Like, is there any reason for that? And I get them talking to me, and you say, well, you know, we don't really encourage LinkedIn very much, and you know, here's why. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, you know, I'm not sure if you're aware. And then I educate them on like maybe the benefits of LinkedIn for the sales rep. Bigger network, more exposure, you know, can help the business because more exposure means easier to recruit, more brand awareness for purchases, all this kind of stuff, right? And so I just, you know, I'm using like LinkedIn as an example. It's the only thing I could think of off the top of my head, but that's how you tailor these questions. And the urgency piece, people care a lot more about what they're losing than what they stand to gain. This is human nature. So if I just talk to you about what you stand to gain because of something, it's more difficult people to imagine. People are more apt to say, they look around their house right now or their room, and they're like, well, you know, I'm kind of doing okay right now. So I'm not really, I don't really know that I need to dream bigger or whatever. But if you talk to them about what they stand to lose, if I was to tell you, look, you know, not making this change right here is affecting your business every single day. Like you're losing 2 or 3 customers a week, and your average customer is $10,000 a year. Okay. You're losing $30,000 a week. 30,000 times 52 is a lot. 1.5 million, right? Over the course of the year. So you find a way to take the urgency, convey the loss and the pain, and dollarize it. This is a phrase my friend Rob Jepson came up with, is a dollarized phrase. Convert it into an ROI and put numbers in there and make them realize, wow, you know, this is actually a pretty brutal problem, right? And most people have no idea that they have these problems, let alone very specific dollar amounts that it's costing them or impacting them. And that tends to make people move.
Yeah, I really like it. I mean, I think like price and dollar money, like people usually really understand it well. And when you're saying like, okay, you're throwing money out of the window, like usually people get pretty like interested about that. We have a few questions from the audience. So guys, like again, if you have questions for those of you who joined us like during the live, make sure to ask everything in the comments. Question from Nadia was asking like what to focus on primarily when creating your sales playbook from ground up and how to build a structure around it.
Yeah, core components of the playbook to me is the cold call pitch, right? The demo script or pitch, how you're going to run a demo, most common objections, and then the rebuttals to those objections.
Yeah.
What I call a competitive landscape document, which is who are all the competitors in the space? And then why would somebody purchase them and not you? And why would somebody purchase you and not them? You need to build out the email cadences, right? And the sequences and write that actual copy that's in there. You need to figure out your pricing model. You need to figure out your contract terms. You need to figure out the sales tech stack that you're going to use, like what CRM, what enablement platform, things of that nature, what coaching platform. All of these things, you know, go into the sales playbook. The sales playbook is the strategy. Your ICP is another thing, your ideal customer profile. So it's like, what's the go-to-market? What's the strategy? What's the process? What's the messaging? What's the people? Like, what kind of people do I need in order to grow this? Like, how much experience do the salespeople need to have, and things like that. Those are all the things that go into the playbook. Once you have the playbook, it's very easy to execute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very easy to execute. You have provided all these materials for people, and you know your job is to put all those materials and display them in such a way that the salespeople, when they're on calls or sending emails, they know exactly what to say in each particular circumstance. Mm-hmm. And you just rehearse and practice those things over and over, right? And that's just all it is.
That's really great. I'm actually really curious because you mentioned two things. The first thing are like the script whenever you're doing a demo, which I think like are definitely like a must-have. And then you mentioned another thing, which is at the beginning when you said, okay, like founders usually they're gonna want to talk about like 100 things, while actually only 4 things really matter. And my question to you is, you know, whenever you're building a script, it's usually like on a 1 or 2 pager where you have like your question, how it should go, the flow, etc. And to me, like based on the person you're doing demo with, you're gonna obviously have like different answer. And for them, maybe there is only one like value proposition that's gonna make them, you know, make you close the deal. So how exactly in your process, like technically, how do you do? Because you know, usually it's like, okay, you have all your list of script, etc. But how do you make sure that for each salespeople, whenever someone says that, let's take a super example, like with lemlist, we have, for example, we have like very advanced features of personalization, etc. But for some people, the feature that was the most important for them was actually just to automate follow-ups, which for us seemed very basic, you know, but we know that for one target, automating follow-up is the key thing. And even though I really want to pitch them all the other features, I know that I shouldn't, you know? So how do you make sure that whenever like you're building your sales script, people know that based on the answer, here's what they should answer, you know what I mean?
Well, you just said it yourself. You do a little bit of research probably to know what stage of the business somebody's at, right? Yeah. But if you know these like 3 or 4 core pain points or needs, right? Yeah. Then you ask questions specifically around those. So this automating follow-ups question, right? So if I'm selling lemlist, well, I know that that's one of the top 3 or 4 most common pain points somebody has, right? So I might start with that. I might call you up if you're a prospect and say, hey, I got a question for you. How are you guys managing your follow-up process right now? Are you using any tools, or are you just kind of winging it? Like, talk to me about that. Okay. So I get them talking about that. And in talking about that, now I'm able to listen for gaps. I'm able to listen for things that are broken or less efficient, right? And so I start with there, and okay, there's one pain point I've hit. Now I know these 2 or 3 other main pain points as well. So I might then say, all right, so, the follow-up thing is a challenge. That makes sense. What about this? How do you deal with this? Is this a problem for you guys, right? And so I just kind of ask a couple questions there to get them to admit a couple, pain points to me, until I feel like, okay, they've really admitted to me that they've got some challenges here, and then I'll move on. I'm not going to sit there and have like a 2-hour conversation with them and beat them up over all the things that are wrong with their business. But if I can make like 1 or 2 little inroads here, if I cover 2 of the 4 major pain points, that's enough, and I'll kind of move on. And during the course of the conversation for, that day or coming weeks or however long your sales cycle is, I keep reminding them of why they're here. So I constantly remind them of the original pain points that we've talked about. And then I try to add on maybe 1 or 2 others that start to surface, right? Until I've been able to give them like a really good broad view of the challenges they have in their business, why they're important and necessary to solve for right away, and then how we solve for those particular problems. Knowing full well, if they want more information in more detail, they will ask me.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. And I have all of these other features I can talk about kind of sitting here in my back pocket. Right. And so when they ask me, I'm like, oh, I'm glad you asked that. Oh, here's my answer. Right. And
that's so like the secret weapon. When you can, when you can get to that point.
That's right. Yeah.
Nice. So there's another question like from Natalia. So she's asking, can you show demo on your first call with a lead? Like, can you show the products on the first call? Like, would that be something you'd be willing to do, or is it something to just not do?
You absolutely can do that. Some of it depends on the complexity and nature of your sale. So I wouldn't say you should do that in every single environment there is. Right. You might have, let's say you're an SDR. Your company might have rules that says you're personally not allowed to demo. Can't do that. But there's faster sales cycles where, if I'm talking to you and somebody, is showing interest right away, and I might say to them, hey, you want me to show you the product right now and show you how it works? Absolutely. Why would I purposely
wait and
make the sales cycle longer and say, no, gee, I can't show you the product today, but if we talk next Tuesday, I can show you the product. That doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
Unless you want to report a quarter, like to reach your objectives for the next quarter.
The only thing that I'd be mindful of is I'm not going to show the product before I've had a chance to talk to them about the pain and the value and the urgency, right? And how we go about the solution. So if I'm early in the call and somebody is like being abrupt with me and like, look, Scott, just show me the product. I'm like, well, I'll be happy to show you the product in a couple minutes, but right now I'm really still I need to understand like what's a challenge for you right now. And I ask them a question about our product, in such a way that kind of leads them where I want them to go. So I'm not going to skip ahead. I'm not just going to demo somebody without finding pain, building value, or creating urgency. But once I've done those things, if somebody is open to being demoed, I'll absolutely demo them. Sure.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. And for example, like, do you have like techniques or tactics when it comes to like products that can, where the price point is let's say pretty low, and you can pretty much like directly close during the call? Like I saw like a few people asking to put their credit card directly on the platform, and saying that, okay, like just put your credit card right now, because like that way when the free trial expires, you just jump on the free plan, and you just jump on a paid plan, and your essentially like account won't be blocked. Like what type of things have you used, for this type of sales that are usually like quick, easy to make?
I spent the first probably 3/4 of my career in fairly transactional, high velocity sales environments.
Yeah.
So the number one strategy is actually try to close them. And
Okay.
I know that sounds obvious perhaps, but you'd be shocked how many people are scared to go for the close.
Yeah, definitely. I saw that. Yeah.
First call or the second call, right? So you just got to get the confidence to go for it. That's the biggest hurdle to get over, to be honest with you. But it's simple. If you've done your job appropriately, the close is not the challenge. The close just happens, because if we can mutually agree that you have a pain point and there's value in solving it and it needs to get solved now, and my solution fixes everything for you, what is the need to wait? There's no need to wait. I will say, this is my own personal opinion, I despise free trial models. I absolutely hate it. It encourages salespeople to just tell prospects, well, just sign up for the trial, and like there's no commitment, right? So they're selling like a try and buy situation. And that causes a lot of problems and challenges for the rest of the business, because now you have some account manager who's supposed to try to make sure, well, are they actually using the product? I got to get them to use the product or they're going to churn. Somebody comes up to their 30th day and they want to churn because they don't want to pay. Now a team member has to spend energy there. And it tricks salespeople. The free trial tricks salespeople into thinking they're being productive. Yeah. And if you're talking about a high velocity sale with a price point of like $30 to $500 a month, what are you talking about? A free trial? You're going to free trial something that's like 20, 30 bucks, 50 bucks a month. Like if they don't have that kind of money, that's a shitty prospect. Right? That's a bad deal. And I would encourage you to not close that deal, because it probably does more damage to the business. Right. And it's going to end up, stressing you out if that client cancels quickly and you get like a chargeback on your commission or something like that. Yeah. So if you sell things appropriately, then the value is there. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I love it. Essentially, early on, you were talking about like how companies can reach, like sometimes up to like 250K ARR, and then they like might reach a plateau, etc. I'm more like interested to like, once the company have reached like the million, so we know that it's like doable to reach a million ARR, but going from 1 to 10, what are, according to you, like the changes of the business that should be done from the founders, processes, etc.? Like, have you seen like a big difference from 1 to 10, or do you feel like it's more or less the same that from 0 to 1? Well, you can't get away with the lack of process trying to go from 1 to 10 that you can sometimes get away with going from 0 to 1. Yeah. Okay. You have to become more structured and more systematic. You have to rely on more data points. So you've got to use more data and more information to drive your decisions. And you've got to be able to scale the team. You're not going to go most likely to 10 million with 1 or 2 people selling the product. Yeah. You're going to have more people. And so it's one thing to teach and onboard Scott and have him be a productive quota hitting rep. It's another thing altogether to hire 10 more people like Scott and teach them, onboard them, get them hitting or achieving quota. You're going to have some level of sales rep churn in there. You'll have to backfill and whatnot. So just the organizational complexity of it all really, really increases, right? And you've got to be prepared for all that stuff, which is why I so heavily focus on like right from the beginning, right from the jump, be organized, have this process, have this playbook that you can rely upon. And how often do you change your playbook? Is it something that's like once you've done it, it's over? Or do you like say, okay, every quarter, I think we should go back, look at our playbook. Maybe our script has changed, maybe our product has evolved, maybe we're like developing new key features.
etc.
Yeah, no, it's a living, breathing document, right?
Okay.
And one of the things that happens over time is you get better at explaining everything with less words. So my script when I first start on day one might be like 10 pages long.
Okay.
Well, by the end of year one, maybe I've got it down to 7 or 8 pages. By the end of year two, it's down to 5 or 6. And same thing with all the other documents in there. Like maybe our ICP has changed a little bit. So our email messaging has to evolve and change. We've added new features, and sometimes these new product features are actually really, really powerful. And so we need to put that into the demo and rip this other part out. We shouldn't talk about that anymore because now we need to talk about this. So, you know, you're looking at that like on a every 1 or 2 quarter basis. And, you know, you don't want to course correct too often and make too many tweaks and changes, because you've got to give something time to see and trust and believe that it's working. But, you know, you can't be so arrogant to think that what you wrote in your first couple weeks of joining the company is going to, you know, still be in existence in the same format 3 years later. It's a living, breathing thing. You're tweaking it. You're getting input from the team who's on the front lines all the time. What's working, what's not working. And so you have to have some level of flexibility, and that playbook evolves over time. The things that go into the playbook don't really ever change, but what's inside of there, it's evolving.
Nice. Yeah. I think it makes a lot of sense. And especially like the reason why I was mentioning that also is I think like the COVID-19 pandemic and crisis has kind of like make people like rethink a lot their process, just because some of them had more time, so that to lay off a lot of people. So according to you, like during such times, what's the best thing to focus on when it comes to like prospecting in a time of crisis?
Well, I think the I think the pandemic has exposed a lot of mediocrity.
Yeah, I agree.
and mediocre companies with mediocre processes or no process, and mediocre salespeople and sales leaders have been exposed, and they've become, you know, kind of casualties, if you will, in the business world. I think the most important thing is that you can only control so much. And so you've really got to focus on the things that you can control yourself, right? Like I can't ultimately control what's going on in my prospect's business whatsoever. I can control my attitude. I can control my effort. I can control how I'm spending my time. Am I trying to learn more, be a better salesperson or leader, or am I just watching TV and goofing off all day long? My KPIs and metrics, like I'm in control of those things. I'm in control of how diligently I follow up with people. I'm in control of, do I actually try to close people? And the people that I know who are thriving right now have this kind of mindset. And rather than being down about it or pouting or nervous or scared, their approach is like, well, I have to succeed anyways.
Yeah,
I can't,
so they go for it. And yeah.
That's right. I can't make excuses. Like if I have to work twice as hard, I'm going to work twice as hard. If I have to, you know, evolve my pitch a little bit, then let's evolve my pitch. If I have to stop selling to restaurants because they're all closed and I have to start selling to some other kind of, you know, industry, then that's what I do. And so you take this like proactive approach where you don't want to let anything stand in your way. You're willing to evolve your process a little bit, but you're staying positive and staying confident and not stressing yourself out, worrying things that you ultimately can't do a damn thing about.
Yeah, agree. And when it comes to like your experience, because I mean, you've been in sales for quite some time and you have like a lot of success story. What I also like to talk about, you know, are like the failure and the mistakes. According to you, it can be either you or some people that you've watched. Where are like the biggest mistakes you usually see when people are like trying to book meetings or closing deals?
not being specific in terms of setting an agenda and asking for next steps. That's a huge one. You know, I'm still shocked and appalled when I listen to phone calls where people say, okay, cool, I'll give you a call next week. And you get, well, what, when, what day, what time? Like, it doesn't make any sense. You know, if you were to look at my calendar right now, I have no available time slots until late August.
Oh, nice.
100%. Truly, I don't. And so if you're a salesperson trying to sell me and you're like, oh, you know, I'll give you a call next week, it's like, good luck, man.
Yeah, I will not answer.
No, this is a very, very basic, like, sales 101 type thing, right? Like, okay, let's talk next week. What day is good for you? Tuesday. Okay, what time on Tuesday is going to work best where I can have your undivided attention and, you know, you're not going to get distracted and whatnot. Okay, great. On that call, here's the things we're going to cover, right? And then what's the outcome of this call? You know, what are we looking for? Is this like a go, no go situation? Are we trying to get a yes or a no? Are we expecting to do a deal? Is this a demo? Or am I going to present to other people on your team for the first time? So set these concrete next steps and have an agenda, you know, for the call. That's one of the sort of very typical and bad mistakes that I see sellers make around the follow-up and the closing process.
And so for closing, have you seen like any other thing? Like early on, you were mentioning people that don't try to close. Have you seen like any other like typical mistake that people are doing in that specific? Or
yeah, another mistake I see is people trying to kind of go for too much. This is kind of a funny story, but like my favorite movie of all time is Point Break, the original.
Yeah, you're a surfer, so that makes sense.
The original Point Break with like Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze and whatnot.
Yeah.
There's this line in there where Patrick Swayze's character Bodhi says, "You go for the register, not the vault." And what that means is like, don't get greedy. So I see salespeople all the time on calls where a prospect says, you know, I'll take the basic package. Yeah. And the salesperson will be like, well, you know, you really should go for the premium package. And they're trying to upsell them right there.
Yeah.
And they end up talking themselves out of a deal. They end up making the prospect think the basic plan is no good.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Yeah.
But the prospect doesn't have the money for the premium plan. So they're like, well, you just told me the premium one is the best one. I don't want to do the basic one. And I don't have the money for it right now. So we're going to have to talk again in a couple months.
Yeah.
Right. Or you just elongate your sales cycle. So rather than getting a deal right now, this person says, well, I think you're right. Give me a couple days and see if I can get the money together. And let's talk again next week. And I'll try to do the bigger one. Well, how many times have you seen that particular prospect disappear?
Yeah, definitely.
Turn into a ghost and they disappear, right? Or things happen and they can't get the money. So I just always remember this quote, like, go for the register, not the vault. So as soon as somebody tells me yes on a particular plan, I go and I'm trying to close them. I'm not trying to upsell them at all. Once I hear yes, that's what I'm selling them.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it makes more sense, you know, in the long run, because upsell comes with time. I mean, if you're confident in your product, everything will go smoothly for the upsell, and that can work. So agree.
Yeah, and you have colleagues and teammates whose sole purpose is to upsell these accounts and make these accounts.
Yeah, definitely.
My job is to bring it in, right? Your job is to grow it. So let me bring it in, and I'll trust this person to do their job.
Yeah, that's true. I know your time is precious, and we have like a few minutes left. So I'm just going to ask you a question from Cameron. So you went through like 3-4 points, like the structure that you would follow in a cold call. Such a phone call allows for a conversation and ability to adjust the pitch according to the reaction. But what if it were a cold email instead? How would you structure it?
So what would my cold email look like?
Yeah.
I actually don't try to pitch in my cold emails. Okay. I'm trying to basically illuminate something that's a problem, and then I try to give that prospect something that adds value or sheds some light on the issue. So to use lemlist, as an example. I might reach out to you and say, hey, I've been talking to a lot of companies in France, and there's a lot of people telling me that they're struggling with finding the right tool to follow up with folks. Check out this article. I thought that you might find this interesting. It talks about the need for follow-ups and whatnot. Let me know if I can ever be helpful. Real short.
Okay.
Right?
Nice.
So it's like, here's a problem. Here's a value add. Here's me giving you something. And here's, let me know if I can be helpful. This is not me saying, can I get an hour of your time? Can I get 10 minutes of your time? It's not me trying to take from you. It's me trying to give and add. And so that's how I start the relationship and start the conversations. Like, plant the seed of a problem, give a little solution, right? And I keep kind of trying to go about it that way. It could be, an article, it could be a blog post, it could be research, it could be, a podcast or like a little TED talk, something. It depends what you're selling, right? You find something relevant, right? I might use video messaging, for example, send a little video prospecting message or a voice message via LinkedIn. Try to be a little bit creative, a little bit memorable, but add value more than take.
Nice. I love it. Scott, thanks a lot for being here and sharing all these tips. To be honest, it's really amazing. Like I've learned a lot, and I'm sure the audience learned also a lot. How can people follow you or get in touch with you? What the best way for them?
Yeah. So you can check out my website, scottleaseconsulting.com, as well as surfinsales.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. I've been maxed out of connections on LinkedIn for a really long time, but you can message me and follow me on there. And I run my own Patreon community as well. So you can check out Scott Leese on Patreon. And I'm very diligent about following up with people. So if I can be helpful, shoot me a note, come to some of the events. Today's Thursday. I run Thursday night sales tonight. I know it's very, very late in Paris, but if you got insomnia at all and want to check it out, feel free to drop on by. So
awesome. Thanks a lot, Scott, and have an amazing day.
Thank you, man.
Bye-bye. Take care.